Welcome back to ET with GOTB, an international break full of highs and lows for some of us across the board. You ready to dissect?
Yep.
Let's get into it. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Okay, welcome back to the latest episode. We have plenty to run through, but before we do, as ever, this is a reminder to make sure you are subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast or wherever you might be watching this podcast, and make sure you're following us across all of our socials as well. We're at Girls on the Ball on pretty much everything. We're joining all the things and doing our best to post on all the things to some varying degrees of success. Okay, Sophie, we did have a bit of a delayed pod this week because we wanted to kind of wrap up the international break as a whole rather than kind of itty-bitty and get stuck into all of the games that we covered during the break. So we're going to be primarily looking at England and Ireland because they're the games we went to, and well, because we're English and Irish. And we will, of course, look at how the home nations did as well. Okay, we will then, of course, also be looking at the surprising news that came out of Liverpool today, and then looking forward to, more generally, the WSL, which is coming back this weekend.
I find it so hard to flip my brain between the two so quickly. I do not understand how players or coaches do it, because my brain is still in international break. We were asked on live the other day about what we prefer, domestic or international football. And I've made a decision.
Oh, yeah?
I've been a lot of umming and ahhing, but there's nothing that beats international football for me.
So I was thinking this, and then while we dealt with kind of the reaction to international football, both in England and Ireland, I was kind of like, I got to the point where I was like, oh my God, I actually hate this bit. Like, while I enjoy the games and I enjoy the travel and stuff, and I enjoy like capturing those moments and seeing new players and stuff like that, then you have to be like, oh Jesus, I have to gear myself up now for the shite that's going to come off the back of this, like, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and that I like less because it's so reactive compared to, say, it's still reactive in the league. Don't get me wrong.
That's right. I think, but it's just because we deal with it every week. But I just love international football. It's my favourite thing, and I love the domestic game. Don't get me wrong, but my definitive answer is that international football is where it's at for me. And if I had to choose between the two, I would go international every day of the week.
There you go. Well, nobody asked, but you've got your answer.
Well, they did. On Instagram, they asked.
Okay, let's kick off with... Oh, that's a good pun, actually. I don't know why I haven't used that more. Let's kick off with England. You were at the Portugal game, which they drew 1-1. And then, of course, Spain last night at Wembley. How would you sum up the two fixtures briefly, my dear, for the listeners? Because people have been interested to hear our reactions to it.
Yes. I'm going to go with the very famous football cliche, never too high and never too low.
Okay.
You stay balanced in the middle. I think there has to be an understanding that every team in Europe at the moment is on a journey, that for many of the teams, while these are highly competitive games, and they do matter to some degree, and the Nations League, I mean, I'm not a fan. I think everyone knows I'm not a fan. But it has a purpose, and maybe in the future it will become an important tournament. But actually, for the moment, I think if you asked any of the players if they would rather win the Nations League or the European Championships, it's the European Championships any day of the week.
Obviously.
So you are preparing for this major tournament, and I do think a major problem with the Nations League at the moment is that they've tried to ham it in this next 4 months. They've tried to squeeze all of the fixtures in before a major tournament, and it gives teams very little. While it gives teams competitive football, and there is a bonus to that, it also gives teams very little time to practice things, to kind of trial things out and give people a go. And I think England have been forced into that with the current injuries that they have. But we would be seeing a very different England side if Lauren Hemp, Beth Mead, Georgia Stanway and Alex Greenwood were fit.
And Frank Kirby.
So I think there's like that kind of context to take into mind.
Which is often lost.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking... When I was watching the Portugal game in the first half, I thought England looked very positive. There were some really, really bright parts of the play. I did like the choice of having Jess Park. I liked the way that she was inverting while Lucy Bronze was able to just bomb up the flank. And I think when Lucy Bronze had to come off at half-time for precaution, she had just come back from an injury from club football as well. I think that changed the whole game in terms of England's dynamic and what they set up to do, and what was working just wasn't working as well in the second half. I do think that we've seen a very defensively solid England that we maybe haven't seen for a few months. I would say that the Spain game would be probably their best defensive performance
night and
that
day
I've seen
when you compare it to the Germany
across the 90 minutes. That's what I was going to say. Across the 90 minutes for quite some time. But I think especially when you look at that Germany game and how utterly at sixes and sevens England's and Germany's defences were, and then you look at them now, they look a lot more solid and a lot more of a unit. And I think that's to do with many things. It's to do with the fact that Leah Williamson is now, in form, fit. I think Millie Bright's now in form and fit, and they're all doing well for their clubs as well. I think there's a nice unit at that back line as well. They're getting to play together. Lucy Bronze is somehow in the form of her life.
How?
Well, she's not quite. It's not the form of her life, because I think 2021 or 2020 was the form of her life. But she is somehow rediscovered,
reaching insane levels again.
Yeah. And I think England are now hoping that she never retires. But
God, she enjoyed that game, didn't she?
She has such a big smile on her face. But I think it's so overall positives for England, bar that second half against Portugal. And actually, when you watched it back and looked at it, while Portugal, it was not great from England, and they need to be able to keep possession, and they got flustered and choppy, and Portugal found a way back into the game, and it wasn't brilliant. Defensively, the goal was the only shot on target. So they weren't giving away too many chances, and I think the same last night. I know Spain created 20 opportunities. I think most of those were from outside the box, and there were only 5 on target. Both keepers had 5 saves to make, and England got 6 shots on target.
Out of 9.
So when you look at the stats in that way, I think there are some positives to glean. It's nowhere near saying they're going to win the European Championships. I honestly don't know who's going to win the Euros. I think everyone is up and down, and anyone can beat anyone on any given day. I think that's what makes this Euros so fascinating, and what's going to be really exciting in the summer as a neutral.
What annoyed me after the Spain game, which I've seen floating around a bit, was like Spain were unlucky not to score. That was almost one of the first things someone said to me after the game was
England were lucky not to score.
That's the point I was trying to make. But thank you so much for jumping ahead there. The point I was trying to make was that England had opportunities where they could have scored more. LJ could have scored 2. There was a penalty shout. Like, it's so interesting how reluctant people can be to praise a good England performance. But as soon as things aren't going right, everyone's hammering it, which I thought was really interesting. And it kind of, go on.
I just think that you have to give credit where it's due. And England went toe-to-toe with the world champions. And yes, Spain are up and down, as are everyone else in Europe. They win and lose some games. Their form is not perfect. And they were without key players. They were without like their customary central midfielder who kind of does a lot of the work.
Well, someone tried to tell us it was easy to keep Spain wide.
But at the end of the day, everyone's having injuries. And I think what England did is they stuck to their game plan so well. They forced Spain out wide. When they cut inside, there were enough bodies there. I thought the work rate of Clinton, Walsh and Toon, obviously Lauren James as well. But those 3 midfielders just covered the spaces when Spain tried to cut in. And then you had, your likes of Lauren James, who had the best defensive performance I've ever seen from her.
Unbelievable.
Actually, best all-round performance I've ever seen from her.
It's because we know what to expect from her going forward, but actually defensively she was superb. And it's something you get with like a Hemp and a Mead, and you didn't always get with an LJ. But what LJ brought going forward was incredible.
Yeah.
That defensive part of her game, and I've touched on it in previous podcasts, when we've seen Chelsea play recently, it's something I've noticed since she's come back from injury. I was like, wow, she's getting back, winning the ball deep, and really putting a shift in there as well. And I just think, who knew there was another element to her game like to build on, which is pretty incredible. So
the final point I want to make is that we have been here many times, in the run up to a tournament.
Oh yeah.
We have been there before the 2017 Euros, where England were really not great. We went to Ukraine and Belarus, and it was pretty dire at times. It was a real like slog. Before the 2015 World Cup, that draw with Canada was not great. There were some really up and down performances. And then 2015 World Cup, you get the bronze medal. 2017, you reached the semi-finals of the Euros for the first time in donkey's years, and beat France for the first time. Same thing going into 2019, you reached the semi-finals, but the form going up into it wasn't
like
great.
New Zealand or someone random like that.
And then going into 2020,
lost to Australia. Remember the run was broken. Right, I
think the home Euros was a bit different because I think everything was being condensed together. So we were playing qualifying campaigns. So we came up against Latvia and Lithuania, and they were easier to break down. But 2023 again, you then draw with Portugal in a really awful draw before they flew out to Australia, and then they go and make the World Cup final. So I do think England know how to turn it on when they need to turn it on.
Yeah, I think for fans it's probably frustrating where you're like, if you can do that then, do that now. But it's also remembering that while these Nations League games now matter as they're part of an official competition, there needs to be a freedom to experiment and try things and fail. And it's better that they fail now, or things don't go right now, or things look shaky now, so that they can improve it by the tournament.
And 1 defeat and 3 wins in the last 6
It's
games.
actually 4 wins and 7, just if we're going to pick and choose data and stats and results.
Why?
Well, it was 2 in 6, and then that excluded the Ireland game. So if we add the Ireland game in, that's 7, and then we add this one, that's 4, isn't it?
Yeah, but then you have to 8.
No, I'm sticking to my stats. They make more sense.
You just didn't add the game on.
Just add the win on. That's how you cherry pick
just add
data.
the wins on. Yeah. Anyway, it's not terrible.
No
form.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to move on to Ireland, because I feel like while obviously Ireland aren't obviously as good as England and haven't won a major tournament, they achieved something unexpected by reaching a major tournament, which has now put this level of expectation on them. They've then gotten rid of Eileen Gleeson and brought in a new manager. So there's another level of expectation. If they're going, a lot of people are saying, well, if you're going to get rid of her, this better be a better situation. What I find really interesting was in the lead up to the Wales games, the narrative in the media was, it's kind of make or break. They thought we were going to qualify, we're good enough to beat Wales, we're going to beat Wales, and we're going to qualify. If we don't, you can understand it's probably the end of Eileen Gleeson's tenure. That was like the understanding, it seemed.
I don't know why there's such a question over why she went.
Now, suddenly, because the Ireland lost so heavily to Slovenia, so, 1-0 win over Turkey, 4-0 loss, battering to Slovenia, suddenly everyone's like, geez, I don't know why Eileen Gleeson had to go. And it's like, now you're just like...
No, but there was some rumour of it. Like when they didn't renew her contract, there was murmurs about why she had to go.
Then, but beforehand, before they lost the game, it was a general consensus that if they didn't qualify, she'd go. That was the kind of understanding.
I don't really understand this question.
And now we're kind of misremembering.
I think there was a minimum for Eileen Gleeson to get them. And that's not to say that she didn't do good things with the Ireland team. She did. And she did a lot of good work. And maybe they don't reach a tournament, but that's not to negate what she's done in the last 2 years. But I do think that when you come up against Wales, who you, like Ireland, was supposed to beat, and I think everyone thought they were the favourites, they should beat them. I know Wales had this special character and everything, but Ireland had been there before. They beat France in the summer. There was everything pointing to the fact that they should beat Wales. And I think when you don't do that, and you don't do it in the manner that you didn't do it, questions have to be asked, and it's inevitable that the coach is going to go. I think, especially with the new contract, like she was coming to the end of her contract if she got there in the summer. So it had to be a kind of make or break kind of time. And I don't really understand why there's so much discussion over that. I think it's right that there was a fresh start. I think it was right that at the beginning of a new cycle, and there's going to be a whole lot of change with Ireland in the next 2 years. There are going to be players that won't make it to the World Cup because they are aging out, and there's going to have to be a new cycle of players coming through as well. So why not have a new manager at the helm to do that?
It makes sense in terms of how football works. And I think my point I was trying to make was that before that Wales game, that was what the conversation had been. We all thought we would get through, but we were like, if we don't, it's understandable that that's going to probably be, they won't renew a contract. It's just the way kind of those footballing decisions are made. And now it feels like because Ireland lost against Slovenia, suddenly everyone's like, why did Eileen Gleeson have to go? As if they're misremembering. I started to question my own kind of memory of this these conversations beforehand. But what point I was making as well is that it feels like Irish media is very reactionary now as well. Also, I'd like to point out some of the stuff I've seen online about players, particularly about Katie McCabe, is disgusting. And, I had someone comment on TikTok to us saying that one of her kids plays football and actually said, always dreamed of playing for Ireland. and has said she doesn't think it's actually worth it because she doesn't think she'd actually be able to manage and deal with the criticism that players get online and from the media. So it's another kind of thing in a couple of weeks of really shit stuff about and in and around women's sport. And I just think it needs calling out, because maybe a lot of it's rage bait, and maybe we're seeing an awful lot more things where people just want engagement. But like, the people, we're all people. Like, we can have discussions, we can have disagreements, we can think things are different. Some of the abuse some of the Irish media get because they thought it was right that Vera Pauw went. That's another one. Suddenly everyone misremembers what went on under Vera Pauw. And, I just think we kind of need to take a step back sometimes. Yes, we can react to these things, but
I think it's the difference, differences of opinion are fine. It's when you become rude or abusive with it and start hurling insults. And the thing that you showed me on TikTok today was just disgusting. And
I'm not going to say what it is.
No. But there's no place for it at all in football. And just because your team loses, there's no place for it at all. I think, and if we're going to take it back to Ireland,
I was just going to say very quickly, Katie McCabe can have bad games, and she can need to, check her attitude sometimes and work on that side of things. But like, these kind of sweeping posts about decimating her character, I think as well, is something that just needs to be reined in. But yes, my key takeaways from those, I think from the Turkey game initially, I felt like there was a lot of context around why the performance wasn't brilliant. I thought the weather played a huge part, the wind. I thought the pitch was one of the worst pitches I've seen in an awful long time. And Carla Ward said pre-match that, they were already going to be trying something new. She'd been in for 2 or 3 days in terms of sessions with players. They were already going to be trying a new style of football, which they then had to adapt to because of the pitch during the warm-up, which is very difficult. I also think players just haven't really been in form for Ireland over the last maybe 2-3 games. I think the Wales game has hit them harder than they might have realised. And I just think some players haven't turned up in the way that we're used to seeing them turn up. And then take the Slovenia game. I also think Ireland maybe thought, we're in League B, we dominated League B last time. This is a great opportunity for us to try new things, for Carla to try new things, for bring Katie central, things that maybe we're not used to seeing from the Ireland team. And like I said, the Nations League is a time to practice and try new things, but actually they aren't playing well enough to then try new things against teams like Slovenia. And I think that was proven. And what was good was that they changed very quickly at halftime, which is a good thing to see. In terms of
I think the thing is, it was a really poor performance. And I think the first people to admit that are Carla Ward and her players. And I think you saw that in the post-match reaction on RTE from both Katie and Carla. They were, and you've seen it from Denise O'Sullivan on social media as well, and a few others. They know that performance wasn't acceptable and it was below their standards. They probably know more than any of us how disappointed they are in themselves in that. I think there are obviously rightful discussions about what happened, what worked, what didn't work on the pitch, why it happened. And I think those narratives those conversations should happen in the media. But I do think the sort of immediate maybe calling that is going to be a failure. It's been 2 games, and in those, football is such a funny sport, and honestly, for want of a better word, shit just happens, and you can have a really, really bad day at the office. And that's not to shy away from it. You have to deal with it and understand why that happened so it doesn't happen again. But at the same time, I just remember when we were in the car and you were getting obviously very stressed about the result. And I was like, it's one of those games where everything at the moment is sort of in the air a little bit because everything's trying to settle down under the new management. It's going to take a bit of time. They are trying new things. Carla Ward's learning. She's never done international football. It's a learning process for every single person involved. And I think they will come into the camp next with the doubleheader against Greece being a lot more prepared for what's going to happen.
I think my stress was more about I knew how it was going to be perceived.
No, I know that, but I'm trying. I think my point is that you can't shy away from the conversations about the bad performance. It's not glossing over it, but it's also understanding that these things do happen in football, and there are serious things to be fixed, and there's no one that knows that more than the squad.
I will say, though, like England, is that you do see this really reactionary stuff in the media. You know, a pitch side, they were asking Carla, is it time to tear up her approach and try something different? You're two games in. Like, it's just such a stupid, like, approach to it, you know, or you see people coming out of the woodwork now going, didn't think she was the right appointment. It's like, didn't hear any of you when she was appointed. Now suddenly know-it-alls are saying, well, I thought, you know, so it's just, that's the stuff about international football where it just gets my back up because I'm like...
But it happens in domestic football too. She needs time, they need time. It's actually the perfect time for this kind of blip to happen because it bucks up their ideas. I mean, you never want a blip like this to happen, but it bucks up their ideas. It stops them getting complacent. And they've got, you know, a 2-year cycle to the World Cup. Basically, a Nations League before the qualification for the World Cup. So they've got the time to get on and fix it. And you'd rather this happen now than in the middle of qualifying for the World Cup in next year.
There's just a lot of expectation now in Ireland, and making a major tournament is kind of where people expect them to be, and dominating League B is where people expect them to be.
I expect them to make the World Cup.
But I think as well, what's new for Ireland is dealing with the expectation and no longer being the underdogs, and that's a new thing that they need to get used to. I think they're struggling mentally at the moment. Right, looking to the home nations now. Not a brilliant couple of games for Scotland, but you know, 2 losses against Austria and the Netherlands. They did go up 1-up against the Netherlands, which is quite exciting. But 2 losses. They are obviously under an interim manager at the moment, kind of a bit up in the air, which is difficult. And there was a lot of new players coming in as well. There's players getting debuts, which is great, but a difficult time where you want a manager in to start kind of laying down roots, and if that can be a struggle as well.
It's a real problem because you sort of understand why they haven't like immediately hired someone new, and maybe the Scottish FA are looking to the summer and realising that once the Euros are done, suddenly a whole host of managers will be free to snap up. But then you have the problem of waiting too long and not starting something new. And I think you've seen that when you look at like the Matildas with Australia and how they've waited. Tony Gustafsson left last summer, and they still don't have a manager yet. And it's kind of stalled their progress. And if anything, they seem to have gone a bit backwards. So I think there's that worry for Scotland. They were really poor against Austria. Yes, it was 1-0, but they were really, really flat. I didn't see the game against the Netherlands, but I think there was disappointment. Certainly Kirsty Hansen came out and said that she was disappointed with her performance against Austria. And they it's just a really weird state of flux that they're in at the moment, because they don't really know whether they're coming or going. They've got nothing to aim for in the summer. They obviously want to get in a good position for World Cup qualification, but other than that, it's just kind of a bit up in the air.
For Wales, they lost to Italy, but then drew with Sweden. And to be honest, I'm not like hugely surprised that they drew with Sweden, because I think if any team that you're going to pick, like Ireland nearly drew with Sweden, and I think sometimes Sweden's struggles are their consistency and in front of goal. And I think as well, when they play against teams who will play maybe a bit more openly against them, they're more effective. But when they play teams that are more defensively solid, we see a lot of the time it's more difficult for them to break down. So I'm actually not hugely surprised that that's where Wales got a point.
I think Rhian Wilkinson will be incredibly pleased with the resilience her side have shown, because they went behind within 5 minutes against Italy, and they battled back, and they battled hard. And I think my fear when I was looking at their Nations League group is that they get run over to the point where the preparation for the Euros got hampered. And actually, yes, it's a huge point against Sweden that, yes, they lost Italy, but at the same time, they can take so much from those performances to take into the summer. Sweden are, but I also think sort of really illustrates the state of football across Europe at the moment. Everyone's dropping points here, there, and everywhere, even the best teams in the world. And it's giving, younger teams, developing teams, a chance to really put their mark on it. If you look back to Ireland's win over France last summer, things are just a bit crazy at the moment.
Northern Ireland started off with a loss to Poland, and then they won 3-2 against Bosnia and Herzegovina. So a big 3 points for them, which is great for Tanya.
And I think the 2-0 against Poland, especially Poland, are preparing for their first major tournament. They have some serious talent in that squad. So to keep it to 2-0 away from home, and then to come back from that kind of disappointment of losing that opener, to battle against Bosnia, yes, it's not perfect, and there's always there's so much stuff for them to work on, but it's something to build on, I think, in terms of moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, that is kind of a quick whistle stop tour through the international break and the games that we covered. Lots more obviously happened, and maybe we can go through a bit more of an in-depth Nations League look at the table when we're a little bit further along in this run of games. We'll move to the WSL, and breaking news coming out today was Matt Beard's sacking at Liverpool, which personally came as a huge surprise. I didn't see it coming. I've seen some people say they thought it would come, but maybe at the end of the season. I still don't understand why they've sacked him at all, to be honest. A quick run through him and his kind of time at Liverpool. He came into Liverpool in 2012, won the league in 2013 and 2014, kind of putting a stop to that Arsenal dominance at that time. Returned in 2021, immediately won the championship and was promoted into the WSL. When they returned to the WSL, they beat Chelsea in their first game. They then beat West Ham, Man City, Reading, Tottenham and Brighton in their first season, finishing 7th. They then went on to finish 4th the following season in the 23-24 season with 12 wins and 5 draws, beating Arsenal, Man United twice and Chelsea along the way. And he won WSL Manager of the Season. He did, of course, famously take West Ham to the FA Cup final for the first time as well. They're currently sitting 7th in the table. They've not had a great season. They've had a big number of injuries to key players as well at the start of the season. We know their budget is slim. I think they're the 4th lowest budget in the league. And most of that was blown on Olivia Smith at the beginning of the season. They have 2 points between them and Tottenham. Tottenham are in 6th on 17 points and Brighton are in 5th on 18 points. They play Palace this weekend, while Brighton play Chelsea and Spurs play Man City. So it is not beyond the realms of possibility that by the end of this weekend, Liverpool could be in 5th place, and they've just sacked the manager. So I've seen people on social media and they've come and told us that he's not a good manager. He's no tactics. He doesn't know what he's doing. I've just read out his CV there. What?
Yeah, I'm baffled. I've always said that I think Matt Beard is one of the most
underrated
and perhaps underappreciated managers in the WSL. You missed out his little Hail Mary campaign with Bristol City.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Where they were really, really out of it, and they went on that ridiculous run of form to take. Yes, they eventually got relegated, but they took it to the final day of the season. And I think that epitomises what Matt Beard is about in terms of the way that he can manage a team and kind of get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet a bit. I'm baffled. I think this is a huge problem I'm going to keep it to the WSL, but in our league, in the Barclays WSL, where you have teams who, rather than actually fixing the crucial problems of really investing in football, in the women's game, and standing up and putting their head above the parapet to say, yes, we believe in this, we're going to invest it and give them all of the resources, that we can. And I'm not saying go over the top, but I'm saying, keep up with the investment.
Be realistic, though, as well.
Yeah, be realistic. They think that they can get rid of managers left, right and centre and that's going to heal the problems. No, yes.
You can invest a little bit and that's going to help you challenge top 4.
You might get a new manager bounce when a new manager comes in, but very soon the underlying problems will come to fruition again and you'll be sacking another manager before you know it. I think I'm really, really sick of teams with money not standing up and putting money into the game. And we saw criticism of Chelsea when they do just that. But Chelsea put their money where their mouth is and they invest properly in the sport. And there are still things they can invest more in, don't get me wrong. But
if they spend more on one player than a team does, the league.
But they're leading the way and they're going, this is how, and they do it over a sustained period of time. They had Emma Hayes for, over a decade. I wouldn't be surprised if Sonia Bonpasta is there for many, many years. They build around their manager and they give them the resources that they need to succeed. And other teams, quite frankly, need to step up. When you have a team like Liverpool that has the money that Liverpool has, that has, the prestige, and a team in the men's side of the game that are about to cruise to the Premier League title, they are not short of cash. And for them to be squabbling over a couple of 100,000 in terms of budget over, what they waste into the men's team every single week, for me is just, quite frankly, it's not up to speed. And it puts the pressure and the blame on the managers. And Matt Beard is, as I said, one of the best managers to have been in this game for a long time.
Yeah, and it's also a pattern we've seen with other teams where they will have a good season and clubs suddenly seem to expect that to be their minimum, and then they'll have a dip, and we see that. And I think the fact that Matt Beard isn't even allowed to have one poor season, and a poor season where they could still potentially finish fifth.
They've won 4 of their 6 games in 2025. They seemed like they were
but I think they've only won 4 games though, haven't they?
No, I know. In
general,
the league,
which isn't great.
So I understand that, but when I'm talking about turning a corner, it feels like they've been turning a corner in the last 6 weeks. So it's weird timing, and I just it's just not a valid fix for me. It's just to keep. Liverpool haven't kept changing managers, but you know what I mean. It's a theme across the lower clubs in the league that when things go badly, the first things to go.
Also, a new ground and a new training facilities don't turn you into a top 4 side. Like, you need to be spending the money on the pitch as well.
That's what I was going to say. Sorry, I was going to add that yes, you finish 4th last season, but then you have to invest to keep up. Everyone else is spending. Chelsea's spending, and if you think that's it, and because you got to that level, then that's going to be enough to carry you through. No, you have to keep going. You're not like spending the money that will keep you to that level. You have done well in a season to get to that level.
And like people have been saying, they've been playing too negative and defensive football. I think with the injuries they had and, the players they have weren't able to produce, I think, the style of football that these fans are expecting them to play. And then you look at that City game, for example, and they were getting themselves into good positions and not taking them. And there has to come a point where you can't blame a manager for a player not finishing opportunities. I think it didn't feel like a 4-0 game because Liverpool had created those chances until then City banged in too quickly and they kind of fell away. So one thing I will say, happy to disagree about whether you think Matt Beard should or shouldn't be manager, but don't tell us we don't watch the games. If you're going to come for us, don't come for us for that, because we absolutely do.
We've watched 90%, 95% of the games this season.
So. Don't come for us for that. That's just silly. All right, more widely, WSL is back. This weekend, we've got Manchester United versus Leicester, Aston Villa versus Everton, Tottenham versus Manchester City, Crystal Palace versus Liverpool, Brighton versus Chelsea, and Arsenal versus West Ham. So I will be doing Spurs versus Manchester City. You will be doing Crystal Palace versus Liverpool.
Got a bit spicy, that one.
I will be listening to the United-Leicester game en route, hopefully. And then, if I'm really lucky, back in time to catch some, if not all, of the Arsenal versus West Ham game. I don't know whether I'll get back for it, but I'll definitely watch it back. And then we'll spend one day catching up on the rest. So yeah, it should be... Looking forward to getting back into the rhythm of that. But yeah, I mean, we'll be doing a live again this Saturday. I keep saying we have a rare Saturday off, but it's actually becoming less rare, isn't it?
It really annoys me how all of the games are on Sunday.
Yeah,
it just makes my Mondays absolute hell. So.
Yeah, but we will do a live
doing it.
on Saturday, so do join us for that. They've been really fun as of late. Otherwise, we'll be back with our next episode of Extra Time with Girls on the Ball early next week. We'll speak to you then.